Alright, get your imaginations ready because today we talk about imaginary numbers. Imaginary numbers came about because there was no explanation for what happens when you take the square root of a negative number. It wasn't until about 1600 when René Descartes came up with the idea of using imaginary numbers. He decided to attach the letter I, meaning the square root of -1, to numbers to explain the square roots of negative numbers. Here's how it works. In example number 1, I'm going to take the square root of -625. When I do so, I know that the square root of 625 is 25, and I attach the I to it. Just like real numbers, there is a positive and a negative solution. Again, let's take a look at the square root of -14. I take the square root of both sides, and let's break it down this time. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of -14 is the square root of -1 times the square root of 14. When simplifying, the square root of -1 is I, and the square root of 14 is just 14. So my final answer is x equals I times the square root of 14. Let's try another. When solving 5x squared equals -20, I will first divide both sides by 5. That leaves me with x squared equals -4. I take the square root of both sides, and since I'm taking the square root of a negative number, my answer will have I in it. My final answer is x equals plus or minus 2I. Now it's your turn. Pause the video and try the on your own problems below. When finished, check your answers. For the first problem, you should have divided both sides by -8, saw that x squared equals -3, and your final answer is x equals plus or minus I times the square root of 3. For the second problem, you should have subtracted 17 first, saw that 3x squared equals -147. I divide both sides by 3. X squared equals -49. Taking the square root of both sides, I end up with x equals plus or minus 7I. Let's look at a few more challenging examples on the back. Let's turn to example 3. In example 3, I'm asked to do some operations with either I or the square roots of negative numbers. When doing so, I can treat I just like a variable. So, in part A, I will multiply my two terms together. I get -70 times I squared. This can be simplified even more. Let's look. -70 and I squared is really the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. Simplifying further, this is -70 times -1, which equals 70. Let's look at part B. I've got negative the square root of -25, which is 5i, minus the square root of -100, which is 10i. Again, I treat I like a variable and combine my like terms. I'm left with 15i, and that's negative. How about example C? The square root of -3 is I times the square root of 3. And again, I have I times the square root of 3. Combining my like terms, I'm left with 2I times the square root of 3. And my last example. I want to simplify the top and then the bottom. The top, I get 5i, and on the bottom, the square root of negative 64 is 8i. I treat I like a variable, and since it's on the top and the bottom, they cancel. I am left with 5/8. Alright, now it's your turn. Try the on your own problems below. When finished, check your answer. For the first on your own, you should have gotten negative 21. Next, when I take the square root of negative 16 and negative 4, you should have gotten 6i. For part C, your final answer is negative 7. And for part D, your final answer is 1/2. If you have any questions about the on your own problems, please come to class prepared to ask your questions. Well, I hope I expanded your brain and you got those imaginations running. Good luck with imaginary numbers.